Elizabeth, welcome to the show. I am so glad to have you here today.
I am glad to be here, John.
Yeah. I read your story and your bio, and I've been to your website and everything else, and it fascinates me how you have made the transition throughout your life from a corporate setting to one like you are now. You still work with people in the corporate world, but it's an entirely different way, and I think my audience is going to get a lot of inspiration out of this for sure.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, with that being said, why don't you tell us how you went from being an executive in a software company to doing what you do now?
Good question. Yeah. I used to work in a software company and I was the VP of the sales engineering department. And it really was not bringing me a lot of joy in my life. And so, what I did was I went to a therapist, probably more as a coach rather than needing like deep therapy or anything like that because my
Mm-hmm.
husband and I had decided that we weren't going to have kids. And so I was like, how am I going to make the world a better place? My
Right.
mom had just passed away from breast cancer. And I knew that if I was going to keep doing what I was doing in my own health, that I was going to follow in her direct path. And I
Mm-hmm.
had started cleaning up my own diet and exercise and incorporating those things into my life. And it, and I would love to say that when my mom passed away, that was like the catalyst that
Right.
immediately made me change. But I
Mm-hmm.
really did struggle with my health for a number of years after that. And anyway, so I was currently I was traveling for this business, and it just didn't seem like what I was doing was where I wanted to live my life. And so
Right.
my therapist suggested, I think you would be a really good wellness coach. And
Mm-hmm.
I thought about it for a little bit and I was like, I could totally do that, because if my mom's uh, death did anything, it was inspire me to not only clean up my own health, but
Mm-hmm.
then inspire me to help other people not to have to go through that same thing. Um, yeah, and so that's kind of my mission now is how do I prevent or how do I help someone prevent having a lifestyle disease? Yeah.
Yeah. I'm glad that you said it like that, lifestyle disease, because that is a term that most people, you don't talk a lot about it, but nowadays that's exactly what it is. So much of, our lifestyle and the aspects surrounding it are the cause of so many issues that we deal with. And
Mhm.
one of the other things that I was really intrigued about talking with you about is because in your wellness coaching and life coaching, you kind of use the same exact principles behind it, at least from what I can gather that I do. It's more about finding limiting beliefs in people and finding the things that are holding them back and helping them realize that those don't have to be barriers, that those can be dealt with, and you can actually change your beliefs, and by changing your beliefs you change your state, and in turn you change your health.
Right. Yeah, because when I first started on my path of helping people, it was really kind of funny because, I was trying to do this for myself. And I was like, okay, all I do need to do is learn everything. And so I learned everything that I could about nutrition and I learned everything that I could about personal training. And I was like, okay, now that I know all this stuff, now I'm just going to do it. And it was so confounding to me because I think this is probably true for a lot of people. They're like, if I just know everything, then I'm just going to go ahead and do it. But I was like, why am I not, adhering to the principles of proper nutrition. Like I had
Hmm.
my exercise dialed in, but I was still doing things like binging on the weekends, or, eating foods that really weren't very good for me. I would do the restriction for a few days or a week or 2 weeks, and then I would just fall off the rails.
Hmm.
And I was like, so what is it? And I started trying to develop habits, and that helped, but I was still having some problems making it all work. And
Right.
so it wasn't until I realized, so imagine like a pyramid, and this pyramid has 5 different layers of it. And at
Right.
the top of the pyramid, the very top triangle layer is your environment. And so, we give advice a lot of times on environmental change. So, for example,
Hmm.
if you're going to quit smoking, throw away all your cigarettes, throw away your lighters and your ashtrays. If you're going to exercise, then make sure you pack your gym bag the night before and, go drive yourself to work on the way to the gym or on the way home. As far as
Hmm.
cleaning, or as far as your diet goes, make sure that you create a clean kitchen with all of the foods that you want to have and eliminate the foods that you don't. And then the next layer down from that is habits. So the way to create a habit is to peg one behavior to another. So, like I said, with going to the gym, you would peg going to the gym with your drive to work or home from work.
Hmm.
And, those two things are great. But what happens is when we get stressed out, or when something happens out of the ordinary that we don't account for,
Hmm.
then those habits kind of just go, you know, out of the park, right?
Right. Yep.
If I make sure that if I'm creating this environmental habit for my kitchen,
Hmm.
then and have to prepare all my foods on Sunday, then what happens when I go out of town for the weekend? I don't have time for that. And so therefore, I can't make that happen. I can't be successful
Hmm.
during the week.
Yeah.
And so the next layer down from that is skills. So learning how to cook, or going to
Hmm.
the restaurants and picking out, healthy foods, or learning how to exercise, so on and so forth. And so there are 2 more layers. And when I realized this, it was like a light bulb went on for me. Skipping down to the bottom layer of that triangle is
Right.
identity.
Hmm.
And so if I don't see myself as a healthy person or an athlete or someone who is worthy, then I'm not going to adopt the beliefs, which is the fourth layer,
Hmm.
that would help me to, create those habits, and that, be a healthier person. And so once you
Right.
have the identity dialed in, then everything else bubbles up.
Hmm.
Gain the skills, you create the habits, and your environment just is taken care of. You don't have to start at the top.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah, it's really, and touching back a minute on what you were saying, you were talking about how the visualization aspect of it. How important would you say that visualizing goals and outcomes is to success in anything that we do in life? Because I think it's a tremendously powerful aspect.
Well, I can only really talk about my own experience with visualization, and that is
Hmm.
that I know in the times that I haven't visualized the future,
Hmm.
that it hasn't happened.
Right, right, right. Well, it's like what they say. Your mind is going to find what you're telling it to look for. If you're telling yourself, if you're embarking on a weight loss journey, for example, and you're telling yourself, "I'm going to try to do this, but I know I'm going to fail," you're going to fail. It's just
Right,
how it works. Your brain is designed to help you survive, but it's going to do what you tell it to do. And more and more, as the research and all these different studies and stuff are being published, we're finding out just how powerful the connection is with the brain to the body, and how you can actually manipulate, even down to the cellular level, what can be accomplished with the body just by manipulating how you think.
Absolutely. And, it's kind of interesting because over the years, so I've been a personal trainer and nutritionist and health coach for the past 15 years. And it's not until the past probably 5 years that I've started doing the life coaching stuff.
Right.
And the reason why I picked that up was because, like I mentioned when I was talking about the pyramid, that
Hmm.
stress will, make everything mess up.
Oh yeah.
And if we can, all of our advice that we have about stress seems to be after the fact, right? So we tell people to
Yeah.
get manicures and massages and
Hmm.
go meditate. And those things feel very girly and they can also be very expensive. But
Yeah.
managing your stress does not have to be. All it
Hmm.
is how you think about your problems. Because
Right.
we know that two people can experience uh, the same event and
Yeah.
have very different experiences.
Yes,
And
exactly.
so we know that it's the way that we think about our problems.
Hmm.
And the reason that I got into life coaching and helping my clients with that is because I realized that with my mom's passing,
Hmm.
that the one piece that I didn't have dialed in was my mindset, was the way that I thought about my life, my relationships, other people. I was really
Hmm.
resentful.
Right.
And, I think that that stuff can really create a cancer in your body as well. Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In my particular situation with my fitness journey, you know, there was a moment back in 2007 where I almost died, and that was a huge wake up call for me. But it wasn't until a very very close friend of mine, who I always thought was like the epitome of health. I mean, this guy was jacked. He was a beast. He worked all the time. He practiced healthy habits and all these different things. And we found him in his house where he had aneurysm, and just boom,
Mhm.
gone. And that was the catalyst for me, that was like, you know what, you're not immortal. You may think that you can get by, and you do all these things and practice bad habits, and all that stuff isn't going to happen to me. Just when you least expect it, it can. So I
Mhm.
think it's truly important now, especially. I mean, we're in this situation with the lockdown, and there are a ton of people that think this is all a bunch of bullshit, to be honest with you. And there are others that see it for what it is. The virus is something that could take a lot of people's lives, and I firmly believe that. But when you look at the scope of, say, for example, the coronavirus, and what the potential is for, what it can do to society, and then you take what obesity does, for example. 2.8 million people died last year from causation of obesity, and it's growing every year. And there are no grand gestures that are being done to do anything about it. So you have to sit back and you have to look at these things and go, you know, where's the correlation between the two, and why is one not as important as the other? It just doesn't make sense to me. And people just get so wrapped up in their brains, and they get caught up in the media and what other people say and all that stuff. You need to quiet out all that noise and focus on you, and that's how you can make yourself healthier and happier too. I mean, at least that's the way I look at it. So now let me ask you, one of the things that I truly loved about your website was the little tagline that you have there that says weight loss coaching for women who are done with dieting. I love that. I hate the word diet with a passion. A very good friend of mine looked at me once and said, the first three letters in diet is die, right? And I have that just struck a chord with me, and I've hung on to that ever since. Why do you think it's important to move away from the whole cliche diet and lean more towards education and lifestyle change?
Because good question. I really dislike the whole diet. And it goes back to the mindset and the identity piece.
Hmm.
I know that, during the time that I was really struggling to get my weight and diet under control, and I use diet in a small d there, not a big D, the difference being like if, diet being the foods that you eat versus a mandated
Hmm.
diet. Um, and I know that when I was trying to get my own shit together, that I would go on vacation or
Hmm.
something would happen and I would be like, oh, I'm going to be bad or I'm going to treat myself. And when I went on vacation, for example, I would, just drink all the margaritas and eat all of the guacamole and chips. And what I found was that once I created, this is my new normal, this is the way that I just eat,
Hmm.
then going on vacation didn't become something that I had to escape the way that I ate from anymore.
Right.
And it was just how I ate. And
Hmm.
so when we think about um, the foods that we eat, you know, part of the problem with diets is that the person who's on them doesn't make the connection between how the way that we eat and how that food makes us feel.
Hmm.
And so I might be doing the same types of things with my client. They might end up in the same end result, eating the same foods,
Hmm.
but the way that I bring my clients through creating the right diet for them is it's very cause and effect. So we
Hmm.
look at things like their cravings, their hunger, their sleep, their stress, their mood,
Right.
and we evaluate how adding different foods to their diet makes
Hmm.
them feel. And so it's
Right.
one thing for me to say to you, okay, John, you're not going to drink alcohol anymore. And you might be like, okay, fine. And then one night you're going to go out and you're going to be like, I could really have a beer. And so drinking that beer, you're going to be like, Elizabeth can't tell me what to do. But if we go through this process together and
Hmm.
you realize that drinking beer makes you feel bloated or it disturbs your sleep or it causes migraines or it creates sluggishness the next day, then those are going to be reasons why you're going to tell yourself, oh, you know what, I don't like the way I feel when I drink beer, so therefore I am the one that's making this decision. Or I'm making the decision to drink beer and I'm going to suffer the consequences myself later.
Right. Right.
So be
I
careful.
work, yeah, I work with my clients a lot on realizing the fact that they're human and they're going
Mhm.
to fail. They're going to fail. They're going
Okay.
to, that something is going to come along. They're going to be put in a situation where they're going to have a piece of cake. They're going to have a plate full of potato chips. They're going to eat something that they know that they shouldn't eat. And one of
Mhm.
the worst things that can happen, in my view, is if they beat themselves up about it. If you know that you're going to fail and you're a human being, um, just realize that and be mindful going forward. Like if you know that you're going to a birthday party Saturday and odds are you're going to have a piece of cake and a little bit of ice cream,
Mhm.
plan for it. Make sure that you adjust your calorie intake for that day. A lot of times what I do is the next day I'll do intermittent fasting if I have a day where I cheat, because it just gives my body a little more time to burn that up. And so many people get caught up in that because if you've been dieting and exercising for 6 months and you've made A, B, and C's worth of progress, and you have a cheat meal, that doesn't take away everything that you've done. But so many
Right.
people, they're like, oh, I cheated on my diet. Well, screw it. I might as well just eat whatever I want to now. And then they spiral downhill and they're right back where they started from. And I really think it's important that people wrap their head around the concept of not so much of diet, but lifestyle change.
Mhm.
Lifestyle change to me is a key phrase that I like to use a lot. I don't like to use the word diet. I typically call it a nutritional protocol. Just because A, it sounds a little more clinical, and B, it gets people away from that thought of diet. Because to me, a diet is something that you start and you finish. I got to ask you, what was it like to just reach a point in your life where you just sold everything, picked up, and moved to Mexico? How did that happen?
Yeah, that so good question. My husband and I had spent a month in Belize, and it was the first time that we were like, oh my God, could we really do that? Could we like live on a beach in a foreign country? This is amazing. And that was probably about 10 years ago. And the internet really wasn't good enough for me to
Hmm.
be an online coach. And not only that, but people didn't really know what coaching was at that point.
Right.
And we loved Mexico. And so we knew Belize wasn't the place that we wanted to stay, but we loved Mexico. So every year we would visit a different city in Mexico to try and find our forever place. And so we found
Right.
this place where we're living right now. We're close to Cancun. And we found it about 5 years ago. And we were like, you know what? It kind of checks all the boxes. So
Right.
at that point, we put in plan that we were going to sell everything and move here. We don't have kids, so it is easier for us to do that.
Sure.
But there are a number of people here who do.
Hmm.
And we didn't want to be one of those people who, when we were 70 or 80, still dreamt of that.
Right.
And we're young enough that we could do it. Our lifestyle in Austin, Texas was really kind of running us. We
Hmm.
had a huge, like 4,000 square foot house. We had 3 cars, a pool. It was just crazy the amount of money that we were putting into just maintaining our life, and
Right.
we wanted something simpler.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I don't. I can't say that I blame you. My wife and I looked. We were looking for a house when we first got together. We were renting. She was military at the time, so she was used to just going for a couple of years here and there. Well, when we decided we wanted to buy a house, it took us over a year to find a place that we wanted. And I live in West Virginia, and we found a 3-story chalet on a little over an acre of land up in the mountains. So it's like COVID comes along, they're like, self quarantine. I'm like, no problem. I do that all the time anyway. So it's really, but I think that's something too that I think people need to pay a little attention to is their environment. If they're in a high stress environment, if they're living in a city and they got the hustle and the bustle and all that, and they can't find a way to separate themselves from that, maybe it's time to look at living somewhere else and commuting or something, because I think that has a lot to do with um, people's health in general. Because you touched on it earlier about stress and how stress is just like crazy and how it can affect the body. When people stop to think about what stress in and of itself does to the hormones of the body and how those hormones play a huge factor in our health, you have to come to the realization that stress is one of the biggest things that needed to be managed. And yeah, I imagine from going to Austin, Texas, and all that to Mexico, you probably left a lot of stress back in Texas.
Well, I mean, no place is perfect. Okay, there's
Well, no,
no
no,
rainbow unicorn. Mexico has its challenges too,
I'm
but
sure.
it's totally different. Yeah.
Right,
Mhm.
right. So now, how did that play a factor? Moving to Mexico, how did that play a factor in your business? Was it difficult to transition?
Well, I had been in health for a number of years. I had started when we found this place. I had
Mm-hmm.
actually started transitioning my business over onto online. I was still
Mm-hmm.
doing a fair amount of in-person stuff, but once we moved here, I went 100% online.
Right.
And, I think that, what you were talking about, moving and commuting to, if you're living in the city or something like that, I don't know that that's possible for a lot of people. But
Mm-hmm.
if there's one silver lining to come out of this COVID situation, is that I think that a lot of businesses are going to realize that employees don't have to be in the office all the time. Sure, there are certain jobs that you need to have someone physically there to do the
Yeah.
job, but I think that we're going to see a lot of innovation in terms of being able to do remote work, which will clearly help a lot of employees have a better quality of life. I'm really
Yeah.
inspired by that.
Yeah, I am too. I'm very very interested to see how things play out when things start to open back up. I think like a lot of things that have come out of COVID are going to be around for a while. I mean, you've got a lot of gyms that are doing they're doing online workouts. I think that is something that's going to be relatively prevalent here in the very near future. That's something that's going to be part of the new normal. I really do. As working with my clients, I do have some clients that I work with one on one, but the majority of them are online. And that's, I guess it's mainly because, I'm obsessed with wiping out obesity and type 2 diabetes. And, when I decided to become a nutritionist, I was like, okay, I can work with, if I work with a client for half an hour, I can work with X amount of clients a day, X amount of days a week at a gym or
Mhm.
at an office or something like that. But if I get into the online space, there's no limit to the amount of people that I can help. If I make a piece of
Right.
content, if I make a YouTube video, and I put it on my channel, that's evergreen. It doesn't go anywhere. And somebody
Right.
may stumble across that one day and see it, and that may make a change in their life. And that's what I'm all about. So, COVID has brought a lot of this stuff to a head, and I agree. I think it's gonna be something that sticks around for a while for sure.
Yeah. So yeah, when you look at all of the stuff on Facebook about like people getting the COVID-19 and gaining all this
Hmm.
weight, it's been really interesting because we're also seeing the opposite. I have just seen a huge increase in my business. People are really reaching out because they want to lose weight,
Right.
and so that's actually really inspiring too.
Yeah, it is, and I think anybody that's coaching in the online space, even after things start to open up, when people get to where they can go back to a gym and whatnot, they're going to be looking for nutritionists and personal trainers and all these things because they're going to be looking for guidance to help if they did pick up weight during the lockdown or whatever. They're going to be looking for assistance in getting rid of that. So
Okay.
I think that's pretty neat. So now let me ask you, what would you say is the easiest way to either start a bad habit or better yet, stop one?
Start a bad habit or stop one?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I imagine there are a million ways to start an easy bad habit, but
Uh-huh.
you know, habits in general. What's the easiest way to start or stop one?
Well, so I think it's really important to understand that the reason that we start a habit may be a different reason than why we continue it. Okay. So when we create bad habits, it's usually because I'm going to say that we are not paying attention to our feelings and that
Hmm.
we are trying to get rid of a negative feeling. So, for example, emotional eating, we do that because we're trying to avoid feeling a certain way, whether it's anxious or boredom or angry or whatever reason that we're emotionally eating.
Hmm.
And so then we may carry that habit on if, for example, let's say that I when I get tired, I like to snack. And that happens every day at 3 o'clock.
Right.
So what happens is even if I'm not tired, I'm still going to continue to have it because it's 3 o'clock.
Right.
So the best way to get out of a habit that you don't want to continue anymore is
Hmm.
to really be aware. So really kind of pay attention to what are the cues that are happening? Why are you doing that? And, I used to give advice that if you wanted to get rid of a bad habit, like after meal snacking or, you know, uh, 3 o'clock snacking or something like that, then
Right.
you should distract yourself. But what happens is that when we forget to do that distraction, our brain immediately goes back to what the original habit was. So when we talk about neural pathways, our
Right.
brain has made a connection between feeling a certain way and eating. And
Mm-hmm.
so those neural pathways never really go away. But
Right.
what we know now is that if we don't reward the habit, so I can feel the negative feeling and not eat, then eventually that neural pathway will dry up
Yeah.
and we'll be free. It's more uncomfortable. It's
Mm-hmm.
not an easy process, but
Right.
it's the most successful.
Yeah. Now, how much would you say environment plays a factor in either creating new habits, good habits, bad habits, whatever? And as a caveat to that question, what habits, if any, of yours have changed since moving from the states to Mexico?
That's such a good question. My diet has completely changed, mainly
Mhm.
because I just don't have access to all that stuff. About
Right.
a year ago, I went to LA for a conference and I went into Whole Foods. We don't have Whole Foods here.
Right.
And oh my God, I was so overwhelmed at all of the stuff. Like, I go into my grocery and I can have like 3 different kinds of cheese. Like
Uh-huh.
going into Whole Foods, you have 50 different types of hummus. Like
Mm-hmm.
that is just decision fatigue at its,
Oh yeah.
hugest.
Yeah.
And so, environment plays a huge effect in that because our lizard brain just wants all of the treats, right?
Mm-hmm.
We can't make a decision, so we're just going to buy all of it. And then when we have all of it, our brain is going to be like, "I want that." And
Right.
so, we turn off that prefrontal cortex, the part that actually is our best interest and trying to get us to our goal. And all
Mm-hmm.
we're doing is paying attention to that lizard part of the brain, the emotional part. And
Right.
so, yeah, our environment has a huge impact on whether we're able to keep or develop new habits. Now, that doesn't
Mm-hmm.
mean that it's impossible. Clearly, someone who wants to quit smoking, whose partner isn't willing to quit smoking, that person can still quit,
Mm-hmm.
but it does make it more difficult.
I can definitely speak to the whole smoking thing because when I quit smoking, my wife at the time was she smoked too, and we both said we were going to quit, and she did not. We both started Chantix at the same time, and I think she took it for like 3 days, and she was like, "I'm just not going to quit." I took Chantix for a week, and week two, I threw the Chantix and the cigarettes away and never looked back, but I was ready to quit. I was ready to quit, and my mind was made up, and hers wasn't. And maybe if I had been struggling with it, her continuing to smoke might have been difficult for me. I can see where that would have been an issue, but I was done. I'm like, nope, nope, I'm done. I'm not going to smoke anymore. So I
Yeah.
didn't. I quit. But I think that's key not only in things like smoking, but like nutrition as well.
Mhm.
One of the questions that I have on my intake form for my clients is, how much does your family support what you're doing? Is your family like, well, you may be going on a diet, but I'm still eating Pop Tarts for breakfast and doing all this stuff. And people don't realize just how detrimental that can be to someone if they're like, if they want to make change, but their willpower really isn't all that strong and their dedication isn't all that strong. Having those temptations around can be extremely difficult for people.
Yeah. Well, and this is where some of the mindset or the limiting beliefs that I work with my clients comes in,
Mm-hmm.
because what happens is the reason that we do anything or don't do something is because of how we feel. And so when we start a new diet or a new program or something like that, the way that we feel is motivated.
Right.
And the reason that we feel anything is because of a thought that we have. And so the thought that we have is, I can do this, it's doable, I'm going to succeed. We have all of these motivating thoughts,
Hmm.
which make us want to adhere to this new way of eating or this new exercise program or whatever it is, stopping smoking. And so that gives us the result of, keeping going. But at some point, our lizard brain again is going
Yeah.
to speak up, and it's going to be like, you know what? You only lost 1 pound this week. This isn't
Hmm.
working. And so you can see how the thought of this isn't working is going to create a demotivation feeling. And when
Right.
we're feeling demotivated, then we're not going to want to keep it. And so being aware of the thoughts that we think, even if they're so sneaky, we can be onto ourselves and catch them, even if, a family member or someone is bringing food in or making comments about how we're eating, or whatever negative stuff that
Right.
we're perceiving to happen
Hmm.
around us.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
indeed. And as human beings, we have what I like to call shiny thing syndrome. If we're not focused on what it is that we're doing and we don't have blinders
Right.
on where that's all we can see, when this little thing goes
Mhm.
off over here, yeah, we're all over it. And, people with nutrition in their diet, they're no different. If they may start out on a diet and they may lose 8, 10, 12, 15 pounds, and then they hit a plateau and they're wondering when the plateau is going to break. But in the meantime, they see this commercial or this Facebook ad for this new amazing diet that somebody lost 30 pounds on in 30 days. And they say, well, hell, I don't need that shit anymore. I need to do that. And they wind up abandoning something that actually works for them, which is why I tell
Right.
people, find what works for you and stick with it. If you hit a plateau, more often than not, you need to adjust your macronutrients. But at the end of the day, if a diet works for you, if you can sustain it, that's the one you want to be on, without a
Right.
doubt.
Because what we're really talking about is the long game here, right?
Oh yeah,
It's a
absolutely.
matter, what do you want to be in, 10, 20 years? It's not
Hmm.
about the next 6 months, although the next six
Right.
months are important, and we don't
Sure.
want to be doing something that isn't working. We want to get
Hmm.
that positive feedback,
Yeah.
but really being in it for the long haul versus a temporary fix. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. So now talking about the long haul, that's a funny transition for this next question I want to ask you.
Oh,
As women get older, I know how men's health can change, but you coach. I mean, I know you coach some men, but you coach primarily women, correct?
yeah.
So with
Mhm.
that being said, how do women deal with the changes in their body and their health as they get older? Because I know hormones have a tendency to play a lot more havoc in women than they do men when it comes to this. So
Right.
how does that all play into things?
Yeah. So, um, I'm laughing just because when I was talking to my husband about women's hormones, and how, when our bodies change, when we're done with childbearing years, that we go through all these hormonal changes. And his response was, that sounds like a, a, a design defect. Like, you're such a programmer. Well,
Wow.
anyway, sorry. um, so yeah, what happens is that as we get older, women past the age of probably about 45, our hormones start to change to
Hmm.
get ready for the next phase of our life where we're not able to carry children. And so, what happens is with those hormonal changes, two things really occur. One is we become much more sensitive to insulin, and
Hmm.
number two is we become much more sensitive to stress. And
Hmm.
so, what women need to do past the age of 45 is we can't do the same things that we used to do when we were 20 years old. We
Right.
can't, like, if we go out and we drink too much or we eat cake, we can't just go out the next day and start to run more or over
Hmm.
exercise. what that does is it creates a stress on our
Right.
bodies,
Yeah.
and it just doesn't work anymore.
Mm-hmm.
So the first thing that I do with my clients is that I want them to change their perception of exercise. You know, it's true that calories in versus calories out is, the method to losing weight. And
Mm-hmm.
it's true that exercise is a way of burning calories. But I really like to decouple those two habits. And I
Mm-hmm.
don't like when my clients think about calories in versus calories out as I get to eat cake, I burn it off through exercise, because then exercise becomes something like a punishment. And there
Right.
are too many people who don't like to exercise. And
Mm-hmm.
so I like to think about exercise not as a way of burning calories, but as something that you do for yourself, a way of managing your stress.
Right.
And so there are tons of different ways that you can exercise,
Mm-hmm.
especially today. Like there
Oh
are
yeah.
dance classes, there's gyms, there's walking, there's bike rides, there's just tons of different ways to be active.
Mm-hmm.
So, really doing anything like that.
Yep.
Walking is an amazing way of reducing your stress. Walking
Mm-hmm.
outside is fantastic. So that's one thing, is decoupling exercise from burning calories and making it more of a stress management system. The
Right.
other thing is really managing our carbohydrates, our
Mm-hmm.
starches, and our sugars. So
Yeah.
there's something that we call starch tipping point, which is the
Mm-hmm.
amount of starch that the body needs in order for someone to feel energetic and focused and not lethargic, but
Right.
not so much so that it gets in the way of her results.
Right.
So we just need to find that fine line between having enough starch but not too much.
Yeah, exactly. It's like I say this all the time. I personally follow a ketogenic protocol. That's just me. Some
Mhm.
of my clients do as well. I focus with people with on people with type 2 diabetes, and obviously limiting carbohydrates is a good way to go with a diabetic. But what I tell people all the time is this: carbs are not evil. They're
Right.
dangerous. They're dangerous. Protein isn't really dangerous. Fat really isn't dangerous. We need fat in our diet. But
Mhm.
carbohydrates, it is so easy. You talk about that tipping point. It is so easy to go over that tipping point, and then your body just stores it as fat. It has nothing else to do with it.
Right.
It's not like protein and different vitamins and minerals. You can, if you have too much of those in your system, a lot of times you can actually eliminate them through waste. You can't do that with carbohydrates, and that's why people really need to pay attention to that. I think if more I think if more education about how macronutrients in and of themselves play a part in the body and what they actually do, I think if there was more focus on that, we'd see a reduction in obesity. We'd see an increase in health, without a doubt.
Mhm. Yeah.
So it's kind of
Yeah.
crazy. So now let me ask you, what is your if you're dealing with someone, say, who is a corporate executive, has a highly stressful job, what are some of the ways that you would talk to that person about reducing their stress?
So what I do with a lot of my clients is something that I call thought work. And I explained it a little bit before, but
Mm-hmm.
it's really just a matter of becoming aware of the thoughts that we think. So when we have a stressful situation,
Mm-hmm.
we how we perceive that stressful situation is going to be really important. So the thoughts that we're thinking, like this isn't
Mm-hmm.
working, or I hate that guy, or that guy hates me, or he's just trying to make me miserable, or my boss is just micromanaging me. So instead of having those types of thoughts, so first of all, being aware, and then secondly is being able to change those, because we can change our thoughts. It's not always easy, but
Right.
we can.
Yeah, you're right.
Um,
Yep, without a doubt, and we've touched on that a couple different times. If you change your mindset, you change your state, and everything follows suit. Okay,
Exactly.
so now the final question that I have for you is one that I ask everybody that comes on my show. If you could
Uh-oh.
affect one thing about health and fitness on a global level, meaning that you
Mm.
would institute a policy, write a paper that just changed how people thought about nutrition and fitness and health, what would it be?
Ah. Oh, this is a hard question. Um,
Yeah, because you
what would
only you,
I
you only get to pick one.
let's see, what would my thing be? Um, oh, could I institute the policy that women's magazines uh, can't lie anymore?
Sure, absolutely. But can you elaborate on that a little bit?
Well, so yeah, women's magazines, I they drive me crazy. How they perpetuate that there's some sort of perfect way to eat, that they keep perpetuating that women should only eat 1,200 calories per day, that carbs are bad, so yeah, all of these myths that women have today and are kind of in that disordered eating that we were talking about earlier in terms of
Mm-hmm.
dieting, like
Right.
all of all of just those myths that
Mm-hmm.
when they give a celebrity diet of this is how so and so eats, that's not how
Right.
that person eats.
Mm-mm. No,
And
no,
it's
not at all.
fantasy.
Right.
So yeah, that's it. I
That's
my
a
my
good
goal
one.
in life is to squash all of the myths that women are facing over diet
Yeah,
and
I
exercise.
agree. When you sit and you look at how many girls today, young girls, are suffering from eating disorders and things like that, and all of that stuff comes from the input that they get, the magazines and the videos and all this stuff. They feel that in order to be accepted in society, they have to look a certain way and weigh a certain amount and be under a certain amount of body fat. And it's horse shit, but you can't tell them that. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
and it's
Yeah.
and it's all of these companies that, to be quite honest, in most cases have monetary goals attached to what it is that they're putting out there. um they don't realize the kind of damage that they're doing to people. I mean, I
Absolutely.
liken it to years ago when the all of the Saturday morning cartoons were sponsored by cereal companies that sold all this sugary crap to kids. And now we've got literally generations and generations of obese people because of it, because they got hooked on the sugar and they never got off of it. It's just kind of crazy when you put it all into perspective. And I think that was a super powerful answer to the question, without a doubt, because it's something that most people don't pay attention to, yet it is extremely influential on women of all ages, without a doubt, without a doubt.
Right.
Okay, my
Yeah.
dear, I am going to let you run. I want to thank you for coming on the show. We've had some internet glitches and everything else that's been kind of fun, but that's what doing this stuff is all about, and I really enjoy it. But before I let you go, why don't you let everybody know where they can find you on social media, your website, and stuff like that?
Yeah. You can find me on elizabethsherman.com. On Facebook, you can find me at Total Health by Elizabeth. And on Instagram, I'm on eSherman68.
That's awesome. Okay, sit tight 1 second. I want to talk to you for a minute before we go. I'm just going to run and wrap this video up, and I'll be right back.
Okay.
Okay, guys, I hope you enjoyed this episode with Elizabeth. She is truly amazing. I love her outlook on dealing with her clients. So if you got value out of this video, which I'm sure you did, make sure you hit the subscribe button, smack that bell so that way you get notified when new episodes drop, and I'll see you next time. But until then, playtime's over. It's time to go to work.